Oh yeah, he's got a sense of humor. Or he had a sense of humor.
I used to really admire his wife Elizabeth until I found out that the Red Cross was paying like over $1 million a year for that position.
Presenters or comprehensive plan?
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the commission. Just to briefly talk about where we are in the process, this is workshop number 8. We made a presentation and nuts and bolts of the plan presentation this morning. Provide you with more information. Questions today is to go over any larger issues you may have if you have or want to discuss anything, because we do anticipate taking this forward. Of course, with your concurrence, so that you can consider it in February and city council in March. We did want to talk based on some of the conversation this morning. We wanted to have our zoning administrator come up and just talk to you a little bit about what the general rewrite looks like and how that could take place and what it would have out that aligns with. Did want to let you know this is on WebEx right now, so it is being televised so people can watch. Our citizens can watch this meeting. But this is Hannah Shavo.
Hello, good afternoon. So when we do the zoning ordinance rewrite, it's not a comprehensive rezoning of the entire city. That's not what that's going to look like. We will take the broad brushstrokes of the comprehensive plan and then translate that into the granular regulations that help move the future of development while being realistic with what development currently looks like in the city. So while the comprehensive plan, we're looking at, what do we want to see in the future? That's kind of the big idea. We are looking at what's on the ground and then how can we help move that forward while being really realistic about what's currently there. And we don't intend to create a city of non-conforming uses or non-conforming structures. That is not the intention here. It's really is a balancing act, evaluating. Really, we are going to look at each and every line of that code and consider the impacts to what is currently on the ground, what is currently built in those districts, and with what those changes will do and what the impacts this will have in that current development. I don't know what that process is exactly going to look like, but I do anticipate that the bulk of many of the districts are going to remain generally the same. Residential districts will likely still have single-family dwellings and will have lot sizes that will be generally the same and setbacks generally the same. So I think that the bulk of those districts are going to remain, again, at large, very similar. And then in many of those cases, where we can look at broadening what is permitted, either structurally or use-wise in those districts to allow what the comprehensive plan wants to see, while also still allowing what's currently there. So that we can, again, kind of move that needle without having completely shaking up what is currently on the ground. So for example, if we want to see more attainable housing, we could allow duplexes in some residential districts. We would still allow the single family dwellings that are there. We'd still allow those to remain, but just adding that additional use. So it's not going to be a complete rewrite or a complete rezoning of the entire city here. That's not what will happen with the zoning ordinance rewrite. If there's any questions on that?
Can I make a further comment? I would say too, we have 2 regional centers. One is Pembroke SGA area town center, and then the resort. There are 2 regional centers. They've already received new zoning through form-based code, the Oceanfront Resort, and then you have the Central Business Core. So we've already done that in small pieces already, and that's what that is.
They're not currently regional centered. That's the plan.
The plan calls for them to become regional centers.
So they've not currently been zoned to conform to the regional centers that we're looking at this moment.
Well, for those areas, they are, because they allow that higher density mix of uses they do that already.
So in those two, I just want to be clear. Those two regional centers that you just mentioned, there will not be additional rezone.
I don't believe so.
No, I don't see us doing a complete,
Already allows for what we want it to allow
right.
for. If that makes sense.
There will likely be maybe formatting changes or like structural to make it fit with the, yes, so that it, clean it up a little bit so it fits in with the, with everything else in the new ordinance, but those are pretty current.
Director Warren, does that include the Wichita Cleveland corridor of the Central Village?
So that is the western campus, west of Wichita, or the Central Village District.
Well, we have the overlay.
The overlay is in the western campus.
Right.
Our next spot is gonna be that Central Village District between Independence and Wichita. And we do have to do a rezoning there. And that will likely be the same type of mechanism to be an opt-in zoning.
I raise all this because of this whole idea of population. What we're, when you sit down to do the comp plan, you're projecting our future population. So within those two regional districts or centers, it says right here, each one is anticipated to have future growth of 12,800. This is from Chris's memo. So that's taking on all the additional growth potential of the city. Well, in section A alone, in addition to those two regional centers, you have 10 other local and city centers listed. Those each have their own future population projection of 31,000 and 35,000. So why are we planning, if you just had 10 multiplied out by 30,000, that's 300,000 more residents anticipated for growth and density, right in just that one corridor of A. Forget all the other corridors that we have city centers. So if this is anticipated to be a guidance for zoning, come in and say, we're going to make it more dense in this density in all these cores that we're laying throughout the city. Yeah, today we don't anticipate a vast change, but if we bless this, I'm concerned that there's going to be significant overreaching throughout these areas with no one is saying, Brian, there's going to be 300,000 people moving. I'm not hearing that. I'm hearing 23,000, 25,000. And I know these plans are difficult to put together, but I know we're bringing forward older SGAs coming out of particularly that A district. And I'm taking them, that's the most significantly attended to district is right in section A. And I'm saying, where's all this growth going to come from that's justifying each and every one of these centers? So that is the core of my concern. I've raised it for months as an issue. I appreciate very much getting the memo to look at the numbers, but it's sort of reinforcing what my concern was. Why do we need all of these centers, and how are we saying we're delicately addressing the needs of these areas of our city if we have them throughout the city when we don't anticipate growth in all of those areas to this degree? So anyway, I appreciate you both addressing that.
And if I can just make one comment, I think the key word with this and with those projections are capacity. That's the capacity, and market is going to drive where we develop. So they're not all going to develop that way or to those numbers. Centers are formalizing what is technically already built.
I don't agree with that, but I'd say we have 40 of them, and I'm not sure I understand why we have so many. 40, and I know there are areas here where these centers exist that we have no future intended plans, any development of this density. Why would we say to everybody, we think we should have 5-story buildings here? I mean, I don't understand it. And I can't be the only troublemaker.
Maybe we can hear from Chris as to, maybe he can speak to that for what his thoughts were when doing that.
Sinclair.
Okay, he should be able to unmute himself, so let's give it a shot.
Chris, are you able, there you go.
Oh, he went back on mute.
Chris, you're on, oh, there you go.
There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So I don't have the data sitting in front of me in terms of the memo I put together, so I apologize for not having it in front of me. But if I recall, the total, again, putting it into the regional context, the total regional population growth, I think, was going to be around 300,000 by the year 2050, if I'm not mistaken. What we were assuming in terms of the capacity, as Kathy was talking about, of each of the centers, and not necessarily what's going to be built out by 2050, I think was well within, first of all, the assumption that the city is only going to grow by 20 or 30,000 over the next 20 years is predicated upon a capacity restraint within the city. That capacity restraint has stifled growth, historical growth in the city. That is what's taken into account by the folks at UVA. What the potential of the city is, I think it's much higher than what is being projected by UVA and the Institute. So the question is, can the city attract more of the region's growth? And I think the only way the city can position itself to attract more of the region's growth is to increase its capacity, and that's what the centers are intended to do. We don't know exactly where the market's going to be paying attention to where the growth is going to happen, where that center's growth is going to happen. This gives the city flexibility. New development, I don't know how the zoning ordinance is going to work itself out, but the way the comprehensive plan is anticipating things is if somebody wants to come in and do by right development within any of these center areas, they can certainly do that. They're not precluded from doing that. But if they want to do something that's more intense, then what the comprehensive plan does is lay out what that intensity could look like or should look like along these corridors. So again, I'll have to dig up the memo and I can get back to you with more specific, I'll do that in just a minute, more specific information if you need it. But that the intent, I think the big key elements of this are, the city has the potential to grow much more than what's anticipated by UVA population forecast. If it does increase its capacity in its places where development can happen. And the centers, if you remember, centers will be the opportunity for that growth within the city.
So aren't there two other provisions in here that are intended to increase housing and absorb some of this growth capacity? And those are the concept of accessory dwelling units, which would be diffused throughout the city, would soak up some of it. And then also the general process of rezoning, where we have small capacity homes being gradually replaced by more dense uses, or even non-residential uses being converted to residential. Every month, this commission is asked to take industrial zoned land and turn it into something else that the market wants more of. For example, up at Burton Station, more multifamily, less industrial. And so those processes are going to continue unabated in addition to all this capacity set up in the centers. I have to agree with Commissioner Plumley that this envisions far more capacity than we would reasonably expect. I've offered early in the discussion, even a center in my district that didn't make sense to me because 3 corners are built out with uses that aren't going to change. And one of them is pretty sure going to be a multifamily. There's no particular encouragement or design to it, you know what it is. So I'm not opposed to the refining of the number of centers to a lower level. But I understand the concept that we don't know how growth is going to really occur market driven over 20 years. perhaps there needs to be some kind of a thresholding that says, okay, you've got a plan out there, but before rezoning everything into it, maybe it needs to hit a certain point to see that that's being activated. And if it really is a dormant place, like the one I'm describing in my district, there's no need to go and rezone that and create things that the market isn't interested in using.
I do have a follow-up question about of Hank and Kathy. So the application comes in and we have these 40 centers throughout the city. It would be identified as being within the center. Is that fair? It would. And so the overlay of that center now impacts the applicants coming for their consideration. And that center and whether it's meeting the demands of the comp plan.
So just as a reminder, there's sorry.
I'm sorry, Hank.
No.
You know it better than any of us, so.
Okay. So, what were we saying?
Now you're on the spot, you got the lights and stuff. Okay. So my question is, an application comes, and we have 40 centers throughout the city, whether it's regional, local, city, center. That is now identified with all the other data points with that application. That's my first question. That's correct.
That is correct.
So now, the question of whether it is meeting the intent of the comp plan as the density is laid out for that center is then taken under consideration. Is that fair?
Correct. And remember, there's different levels of centers. And so those vary by intensity. So if there's going to be more local centers than city centers than regional centers. So, and remember also that the maximum part of the intent, like the most intense part of the center is really only that half-mile core area. And then it sort of goes down. It tapers off to be a little bit more in keeping with the surrounding of that center.
So in the planner's consideration, put yourself in the shoes of someone considering an application to say, okay, this application's on the edge, and so I'm only going to give minimal weight to it being within a center as opposed to the core. Is that fair?
I wouldn't say necessarily minimum weight, but just having an understanding that we're not expecting the densest types of development on the edge of those core area or of those center areas. So we've got the center cores and then the center edges that are meant to sort of go down in intensity to match up with the surrounding.
So likewise, if there was a less intense use proposed for the core, then that would be discouraged under the reading of the comprehensive plan. Is that fair understanding?
I think that would be a note that the planning staff would provide. But it also, the development in these centers doesn't preclude by right development. So if someone wants to come in and do what the zoning ordinance allows by right, then there's nothing to stop them from doing that. So
It doesn't change the by right unless we adopt more stringent zoning for the core centers of the, or the cores of these city, local, and regional centers. I just want to understand. That's all I'm trying to do. I want to make sure I know what we're all talking about. And I'm so if I ask you, why are you not concerned with having the number of these centers spread around the city? What would you tell me?
I would say that there's a method to the madness. Using transit-oriented development principles, those centers are spaced out to optimize transit operations. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's required to have transit to operate efficiently and well. It will still allow for increased walkability, slower traffic, more biking and walking access throughout the city. A lot of these centers, so like the regional center, for example, that's going to be more focused on jobs than housing. And then the city centers are going to be kind of a mix, like a half and half jobs and housing. And then local centers are really going to be focused on increasing housing opportunities. So it's not envisioned to be this big change that's coming in. And we also have protections for adjacent type 1 neighborhoods. So if you're living in a neighborhood that's adjacent to a potential shopping center that might be redeveloped down the line, there's going to be buffer requirements and things like that to maintain the character of those established neighborhoods.
So you believe the type of developments or the development types or neighborhood types with regards to the inherent buffers and guidance that goes along with those balances out the density projected for those centers. Is that what I'm hearing?
I would say so.
Make sure I
Yes,
understand.
I think, and remember capacity, not projection. So the capacities can be a lot larger than what the market will inevitably
Sure.
decide. So we think if we can set the city up for success with growth, then the market will eventually, guide that wherever that may be. It doesn't have to be in every center, but it's giving the city options and opportunities.
Right, and if I can make one additional comment, remember, we adopted 8 SGAs years ago to go down the center of the city. Only have really developed and they're market driven. So it's that same kind of concept. We're gonna lay this out, but it's market driven where it's going to develop and to what capacity. I know that Chris has his hand up. Chris, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I went back and looked at the memo. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And the capacity we came up with was 80,000 population. And I think, let me go back and look at the employment. And the employment was 50,000. So I'm not sure, Brian, where you got the 300,000. That's the growth of the region.
Yeah, let me follow up with you, Chris, to make sure I'm reading this correctly. Because you've got a population, the core edge on regional, total 12,800. Is that agreed?
That's for both of the regional centers, correct?
Okay. So this is for all regional centers, all city centers, all local centers. Is that fair?
Correct. That's correct.
Because like I said at the beginning, I was multiplying out when I had, if you've got
Yeah.
12 city center or 12 centers in the A corridor and only 2 are regional, the rest would either have to be local or city.
Yeah.
10 of them.
No,
So you do not have a breakdown per center. Is that fair? It's putting together the centers to come up with this total. So I don't have a breakdown to tell me how much per center. Is that fair?
yeah, I do have that information. That's not in the document that you have. So what I did when I came up with the capacities was I looked at the densities that are allowed within the comprehensive policies in the comprehensive plan. And then I took away from that existing development within there's areas development that's currently there to come up with a net capacity for each one of those areas. So I do have the detail by each one of the centers, but what you're looking at on that table is the total capacity across all centers. So for instance, on the regional centers, you see, I think it's 12,000 population. Go back and take a look at it.
Yeah, 12,800. And you.
And most of,
Sorry, go ahead.
and most of that's going to happen in the Central Beach Center because Town Center is pretty close to built out.
Okay,
So
understood.
keep in mind, there's development already in most of these places.
So it's just good to understand an underlying principle of the comp plan as it's presented is that while the folks at the Weldon School tell us there'll be growth of 23,000 by the year 2040, we're projecting approximately 80,000 in capacity with our plan. That's a baseline understanding that I want to have.
That is correct. And if you look again at the regional growth, it's 300,000. So you're still, even if you attract all 80,000 population, that's still a little less than a third of the region's growth. which for a city that the size of Virginia Beach, I don't think that's an unreasonably high expectation.
Yeah, there's the debate over the question. There's just simply understanding the data, which I'm sort of wanting to make sure I do understand the data. I have to then gather it and try to pull away an actual viewpoint. But then I wouldn't mind getting, at your convenience, if there's a breakdown of these centers, because then I will know the impact to certain areas throughout the city, whether it's my district or someone else's, of what the future capacity is anticipated to be. We began this process a year ago under the understanding that the inland context area would be undergoing the greatest transformation when it came to incorporating additional residential units and living places. But now it appears to be the resort area that is targeted to take in about half of what Weldon is saying. The projected, I know there's debate over whether it actually happens, doesn't happen, but this is all about planning. So I just want to make sure what I'm saying makes sense, because it allows me to consider it thoughtfully. That's really all I want.
We can certainly give you that center by center breakdown.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got Mulch and then Bob.
I think that brings a lot of clarity to those numbers. Thank you for that conversation. A couple of observations. I think, the growth gap between the Weldon and what we're seeing here is, I think, for the vision of what this brings out, and the ability to add a little bit more inventory when it comes to housing stock. And the comp plan's giving a pathway forward for that additional residential. That's what I hear. What I see from the plan is that the growth is expected generally to happen within those SGAs. It's sounding like a lot of it is going to be within that oceanfront. And then, what I think about that is if we are expecting to have more growth than what we have always anticipated without anything happening, maybe we should think a little bit further about how that growth, where that growth specifically looks like, and how it moves forward. And I think this plan is going to address that, but I think it needs to be top of mind where the growth is going to be, because you don't want to inundate in communities with just a really quick growth. And as far as the amount of centers, it was my understanding that through this plan, we were trying to identify placemaking and neighborhoods. And I think a lot of that is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, please, but I think a lot of the centers themselves were to identify places, whether it be to allow for transit or other things, but placemaking was a lot of that.
That is correct. So, it's not just the density, it's how development is organized within the centers and making sure they're put together in a way that mixed use, people can walk to destinations within the center, a gridded street network, having the intensities drop off, as Hank was talking about, as you get closer to the neighborhoods, to make sure that there's compatible densities on the edges of these centers and the adjacent neighborhoods. So, placemaking, the structure of what we're doing is just as much a part of this as the additional intensities. And just to go back to the additional intensities, in the neighborhood centers, for instance, and a lot of these are local centers. We're not talking about huge high-rise buildings. We're talking about buildings anywhere from 3 to 5 stories, which most apartment complexes are going to that kind of height. So, yes, there's more intensity, but it's also about the structure of the place.
One last observation with the term Western Campus. I think if we're ever going to want to bring in the types of businesses and the type of atmosphere that we want with that Western Campus, I think we need to change that name because it's along the Virginia Beach Trail. And I think we really need to find a new name for it, because it doesn't really give a doesn't give a feeling to me of what when walking that trail and talking to the people that I walk with of the types of businesses that we want along it, as well as types of uses. It doesn't give a feeling of what we expect to be there when you hear Western Campus. So,
Right, and so that was named years ago as part of the number yesterday.
Right.
I think we're talking about Central Beach and it developing and it increasing density wise, especially residential. But I think one of your other key focus areas are just west of town center, and that's that Central Village district.
Right.
Central Village is good, but we can look at Western Campus down the road.
So I appreciate everything that's been said and I concur with all of it. I think population is critical and we would be well advised to take note of it. I am not as optimistic as some of these projections, and maybe optimistic isn't even the right word. I don't have as much faith in the higher numbers as I do the lower numbers from what I've been seeing. And I also think it's very important if we look at the demographics of the population. We are an aging city. It's just the way it is. So the ADUs are going to accommodate some of that growth. And the state legislature is probably going to be dealing with that this session. Wouldn't surprise me at all. So we're going to have the ADUs and the population, and the aging population is going to be spread out all over. But District 4 is sure doing our part to add housing. A lot of apartments back there coming up. Call it Central Village, call it Western Campus, but it's apartment. Yard after yard after yard after mile. That's all we've got. It isn't even mixed use. It's just apartments. It's just residential. So if we're going to be responsible in planning, we need to look at that and make it more mixed use. My 2 cents.
So the briefing was on a look ahead at the zoning. And so I have just a procedural question about this. What expectation would we have as to, let's say city council approves the budget request to take this project on? What kind of timeline will a project like this incur? And is it being done in-house with a consultant? And can you outline for us, is this the next 2 years or
Yes.
6
So
months?
we put $1.75 million in the budget request, and just to let you know, that was also in our budget request last year, but it was requested not funded because we don't have the adopted comp plan yet that recommends it. We anticipate it's going to be somewhere around the 2 year. It's a heavy lift. We will issue, our first step would be to issue an RFP to bring on a consultant, the outside counsel, to help with this whole process. There will be a ton of public engagement with this. So that's why. And it won't go, it's just as Hannah said, it's not going to be a rezoning of the entire city, one blanket rezoning. It's not like that, but it's going to be in pieces and it'll take likely 2 years.
Thank you.
how are we going to move forward with the rest of the conversation? Are we just going to start sharing ideas, or do we want to?
So we did not have a set agenda. We wanted to give you that presentation this morning and then really to see, are there any outstanding items? Because we believe the plan is in a place where there's not much more unless there's big issues.
Yeah, there was one question that I had raised, one of our first meetings, and I think it was off of something that Commissioner Plumley had pointed out on page 12. It says also, according to the same sources, the number of people over the age of 65 is expected to increase by 77% in the city by 2040. We've got a huge baby boomer age range that is going to be getting into, or that they're going to be reaching that age if they haven't already, and we're going to need to address one thing. This plan, what I'm trying to get to, is one thing this plan doesn't necessarily shout out too well is our, especially under affordability, is our senior housing. And I think we need to find a way to give it a little bit more emphasis, because I think before we know it, we're going to have a serious affordability problem for our aging community. And I don't think that that is, if this is visionary, it's not looking at that part of it specifically.
As a comment.
Thank you.
So I'll offer some good news on this particular topic. As everyone knows, because you were CC'd on it, I wrote a very long memo. I put a lot of hours into reading this plan and the master transportation plan. And my focus was on trying to see, do these plans work together? Where are there inconsistencies? Where are there gaps? Not introducing new things, but working with what we've evolved to this point in the process. And I'm very pleased, I will say, that staff took time to meet with me. Commissioner Byler joined me in that meeting. And most of the things that I brought up were accepted as, yes, these would be helpful. We'll try to work this in. And at the end of the meeting, the other things were clarified and better understood, and they also joined that category. There were a small handful that were, thanks very much, and that's as it should be. That not everything merits a change. And so I have to say, if anybody thought I was coming into this with 14 pages of items, I'm not. I feel like the process has worked correctly, and what I am looking forward to is the revision that comes next before we vote. We're going to be voting the second Wednesday of February, and we have over 100 comments that are being digested in here. That's a lot of places to go look and say, well, how did that turn out? What do the words look like? The sooner that we can get that, the better, because it won't last minute us with 300 pages. And just, I think everybody who's sat here today knows, we just deferred 2 items that there's public interest in. Westnick is coming, there's public interest. And so having 300 and some pages of comp plan and MTP with a whole bunch of changes, that's not a moment for last minuting. But if the changes are as has been discussed with me, I'm very happy with that. And so today, from my viewpoint, this is a 10-minute meeting.
So I also have provided a number of items. Fortunately, it's not as dramatic as it looks. If you actually look through it, it's very straightforward, and I provided a little sheet this morning. If it looks like a lot, I reordered what was there and took a couple of those. I didn't add per se much or subtract as much. I don't think it changes the substance in a way that would cause alarm. I will say that I very particularly focused on some language that I thought was political in nature, and I do not think it belonged in the comprehensive plan. Not that the substance wasn't already in there. So, for example, one of them was a comment about density bonuses. That is already something that is being included. Anyway, but I think this is the zoning portion that I have to where that already mentioned.
So it's not, what we've added to the comp plan is density bonuses would not be permitted within the Green Line conference area. They already are not permitted in ITA. So we just carried that through the transition area to cover that entire piece.
So all I did was pull out the specific language that was rather political in nature, and I would say just look at it in a couple of spots. And I did, if you look at the original document I sent you, you can see the exact pages. You'll see the notes and the slides that shows you where that is. Not that I think that we should change the concept, but it's the language and the repetitiveness of it that is intended to have political connotations, which is why I specifically referenced it. Also, there are some additional comments about the Green Line that, yet again, we've got in the area where that belongs, where we're talking the Green Line, the transition area, et cetera. It belongs there, absolutely, and that's just fine right there. However, it's repeated in a couple of other places that it doesn't belong, and it's intended to have, basically to have political ramifications. So I request that we remove items from those locations, not from the locations where they belong. Also, so you'll also see that you'll see big sections of red. It's not that I have significantly changed those areas, merely reordered. I've merely reordered those items so that they align with the order of the city council's priorities. For example, we have economic development, redevelopment and infill, and affordable housing. Those items should be first on the list, and the other items should be second. So to say that's not a dramatic change in the sense that there's a change of substance. It is just a change in the clarification to the public of the priorities of the city based on what city council has specifically. So let's see. This is a low priority, but I did think it was worth noting that because this is such a little known fact, and I've heard people sort of dispute the concept, but it is on the city's website. I thought it was important to add that the green line, and let me clarify, I do not suggest that we move the green line or do anything with the green line. However, I do think that it's important so that people have an expectation and an understanding about this line. And since we're busy explaining in this comprehensive plan what these lines are and their purpose, et cetera, I thought it was pertinent to add that it was intended to be reassessed every 2 years by city council if it needed to be moved or assessed or what have you. That is not critical, but I do think that it's pertinent to the subject matter at hand because we're explaining everything in this window. My highest priority here, and I cannot be more clear about this. I absolutely will not sign this comprehensive plan. I'm not this comprehensive plan, that is, if we are including the green line context area change. If that isn't, I'm not going to be party to a political terminology in this plan. Should go back to the courthouse context area. We all know what's there, but I will not participate in anything of that nature. So we need to revert to that. But I think broadly speaking, that's what I'm talking about. So while it looked really dramatic when you look at what I sent, because it's redlined, you can see that things get moved around. It's not as bad as it sounds, and I have summarized on that page.
I'd like to respond to Commissioner Schoonover's comments. And that is, you probably all received also, but I've gotten messages where things have been changed in the comp plan from one version to another, and they weren't highlighted or somehow drawn attention to, and some of our citizens felt very negatively about change, that we were sneaking something in. So you say you think they're political and they should be moved out, but I think making any change potentially is going to be political. And people are going to say, oh, I noticed you stuck that out, or I noticed you stuck that in. So let's be real careful with changes at this point and whatever, because we've come a long ways. I've been working on this 2.5 years. So, and a lot of the citizens have been following it for 2.5 years. And now we're down to the wire. We've got to be careful of big changes. So whatever changes are made, please highlight so that I can see them somehow. Give me some way to see what was changed without, as Walter said, going through and comparing two documents word for word.
Thank you. So what we will do and what we have done, what we've done the entire process is give you that Excel spreadsheet.
Good.
It tells you what the comment was and how it's being asked for.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We post all of this information, and yes, there's been changes. It's been a balancing act for us. So but we've tried to incorporate everything information as agreed upon as we thought. And that's what you see.
That's right. And when we do our vote, I don't expect it's going to be unanimous. There will be people who oppose. That's fine. But the majority will. And then they'll totally make every change they want, which is appropriate again.
I think it should be noted that, well, you've all been working in this span for a couple of years. You have two brand new commissioners. And we have an obligation our districts and to the city, review this document with fresh eyes. Fortunately, as I say, I don't think that anything I'm suggesting really changes the nature of anything that's there. But I think my view tends to be, I think it's very critical that we not include political terminology in the plan, especially because I'm very well aware of the purpose of this language. And since it's in other places, then it's perfectly fine that we don't include it everywhere. We don't need to repeat everything over and over again. It should be where it belongs in reference to the location. We don't need to have it every place all over and over again. There was one particular term, I've forgotten the exact word. I don't remember if you know. But there was one particular term that was rather sort of implied retribution. And I didn't think that was appropriate. And I literally just delete this whole section because it was yet again repetitive. And it was, I think, an inappropriate term for the document.
So your districts were represented by other members, not you, not Commissioner Marjani, but they were represented, and they were represented very well by other people. And I appreciate your involvement, but don't think that those districts weren't represented. But as far as your comments that you put in paper this morning, obviously I haven't had time to review those because they were just put here this morning.
It occurred to me that because so many people had trouble opening the document that I sent, and because it looked like a lot, that a very brief, you could glance through this and see in maybe a minute what the goal was. So essentially, it's reordering and then removing duplicative things that are not appropriate.
So the staff did go through all of our comments, mine, yours, the ones from committees, the ones from the public. And in this spreadsheet, they've categorized what they think the right course of action is for them. And I'll just say that I support what staff has said they want to do with these comments, mine included. And some of them, they didn't accept mine. Part of that is because of where we are in the process. And part of it is also to carry forth the will of the people from where this started. And I think making late major changes when folks have come to all of these engagements, that's unexpected. And I'm not talking about city council. City council is another matter. We're recommending body, built this thing with staff, and we'll turn it over to them to do as they wish. I will say that with regard to the name of that context area, I have no idea what the word political means. The context areas are supposed to be descriptive. And so we have something that is coastal, and that's what's different about it. It's on the edge of the water. We have a rural area that's called that because that's the character of what occurs in that part of the city. The inland area maybe is the weakest. It's the leftover, the things that don't have another name, but it is inland. And for that reason, it is different. What is different in this area between the blue lines is that uses there are characterized by special policies that transition from a suburbanized or even semi-urbanized north to a rural south. Literally, that demarcation line says things are different here. And that's why this part of the city has an appropriate name. It's not about a building. It's about what's different there that sets it apart from the other parts of the city. So I don't know what you mean by political. It's literally descriptive of what's going on.
It couldn't be more political. And let me add this one piece because of the nature of the comments that I've just heard. You're implying that two commissioners' voices should be essentially irrelevant and sidelined because you all have been working on this for 2 years. I took one look at this plan initially and I had deep concerns about it. I have a different background than you do. And my work has been primarily in politics. And so when I see things political in nature that either excite me, I'm like, yay, this is great for me, that shouldn't be in there. Also, if it's something that is not good, it shouldn't be in there either. I shouldn't look at something and see, let's say, comments related to unresolved political disputes Well, it's very clear to me, which is why everybody's so angry and wants to make sure they're including that. That's why they're very upset, because it's political in nature. I don't think it's appropriate to basically tell Hannah and that our comments should be just sidelined because we're new and you all are working on this. I was selected to be on this commission because my judgment was valuable.
If you're speaking to me, I didn't say anything about minimizing your contribution or Commissioner Morjani.
I'm referencing both comments at the same time.
I do think that if reorganization happens, that it probably happens in the way that, you know, council would want to prioritize it. I think that that's very understandable, and it's not going to change anything in the document, just kind of where it's at. Is that what I'm hearing? I'm perfectly fine with reorganizing it in a specific way if that's fine with everybody. I don't see an issue because it's all the same language. It's just, but it does require a lot of work.
Well, and I believe we've done that. So that was the big comment from the last half, is reorganizing all of the bullets and
Mhm.
goals and everything. We
Right.
did that.
Right.
Yes.
There are a few spots that were missing, having been changed around, and a couple of spots where there were references to things that would have been bullet points that were then not referenced there when we had bullet points for, say, environmental issues, but not say the economic ones, which, as I say, are the critical. Not that this is new, it's just that everywhere we look throughout the document, it has been the environment being prioritized and not the actual priorities of the city in order of the city's priorities. And it's fine, you know, the environment's wonderful. I don't think we should get rid of any of that that's there. I just think it should be in order of the city's priorities. And therefore, we should just slightly reorder those. And as I say, if you look at the document, it looks like there's a lot of red. Primarily, it's me simply reordering or adding bullet points from other sources for the city that were left out in those sections.
And I think in different parts of the city, I think even council would probably agree that the order of necessity within certain areas, I mean, the rural area, I would have to assume that that kind of environmental piece, especially with having Back Bay and the national wildlifes and the state wildlife management areas and all that in the North Landing River, especially with it flooding significantly in a different way than the northern portion of the city does. I would think that if we were to change anything at this moment, maybe change it as far as priority for the specific context area, if that makes sense. Because I think that the economic development would be probably high on here as well with the agriculture. But I think just as important would be making sure that our environment is sustainable in the practices that we do in that area so that agriculture can be a viable product. But one other comment, I couldn't agree with you more, disagree with you more about the Green Line context area. To Walter's point, the only reason that there's a context area here is because of the two demarcation lines, with that being the green line and the blue line. I do understand where somebody could view it as a political stance or something, but not because of the context area. It's giving it its boundaries and what it is. And I think that that means more than just one specific, map dot in a context area, which is the courthouse. I understand that the courthouse could probably be more identifiable, but if it's a context area to tell you what's within this area, the green line context is completely appropriate and should not be changed.
So, I'll weigh in. Okay. I hear what you're both saying. Okay. Almost half the city is rural. Okay. And this area that we're hashing out about did have its name change. Nothing else in here has had its name change. And that was, it appeared to me, now I've been doing this for a while. It appears to me that some folks raised a little cane, okay, attended all the meetings and got what they wanted. In my opinion, this is the green and blue line here. Okay, the green line has long been a point of demarcation in this city. It was originally set up that it was supposed to be rolled beneath it. But that has changed. And now we have a blue line. And there is development in this area. So, you know, now we've got a different line that remains rural. So I understand where she's coming from. I don't know that I would call it political. I would call it, you know, more voices spoke out on it, so a change was made. I remember one of the earlier meetings when I asked about changing names or about why names were such, and I was told they would not be changed. Okay, that was stated initially. Now we have something that was changed. So that's just my 2 cents on the name change. I think there's going to be a lot of focus between us on planning and city council. There are factions that are out there that are making noise, that want to maintain this area as it is today. I don't know what will come of that, okay? Because we are a recommending body, and city council is going to say yay or nay whether we say yay or nay. So that's just the facts of life. Hold on. That's just the facts of life. And I think I don't know if this is the hill to die on, but I want it clear that a name was changed. And at the beginning of this process, it was stated we were not changing names. Just saying. Okay.
Commissioner Cuellar, and then I want to say something.
And one last thing. Y'all that have been working with us, thank you. You got a thankless job, okay? But y'all can pay more than we did. So, but thank you for you know, taking the beatings that you've all taken, and thank you for the work that you've done. Okay, now I'm done.
Sure. So I just wanted to reflect briefly. I'll start because you ended with the name change for the Green Line chapter. And it's the very first draft we saw, it was the courthouse chapter. And all of us attended multiple meetings. There was feedback from our community, and then there was an informal poll taken. And the majority was such to change the name. And so as a body, we make a decision and we move forward together. And it just really reasserts to me that our city is complicated and we have a lot of different ideas on how we are moving forward. I particularly, as an alternate perspective to Commissioner Schoonover, I like chapter 1. And I like how it's been revised because in particularly, it's a result of conversations, stakeholders that maybe had not been previously highlighted. And at first I paused and I thought, okay, we're putting the environment first. Like I was thinking a little more economically with our redevelopment and so forth. But then at the crux of my heart, we live in the city of Virginia Beach. We are surrounded by water and our council is investing in our stormwater. It is our greatest asset. People come from all over the country to come to a beach, and some people will never get to go and see the ocean. And so this is what makes us great comparatively to some of our neighbors, like throughout the state, is our environment, is the ocean. And I've just seen such an evolution in our conversations, in our feedback from the staff and from our citizens that we might not all agree, but I believe this document's going to help us move forward together.
Who's next?
I think that's I'll actually.
Yeah.
Already talked.
I did, but it's important. You know, the discussion on wanting to rename and having the ability to actually rename something when it was said that we're not going to, I was told that it wasn't going to as well. But I think that that shows the importance of why it was changed, right? Nothing else got renamed in here, but it was because of this body finding the
No one
importance.
else asked.
No one else asked. There you go.
Right, nobody else asked.
We were told we could.
Right, but
So we didn't.
you never know unless you ask, right?
So we didn't.
So-
Or unless we
Yes,
So I asked, and I asked this body if they wanted to change it, and the majority of the body wanted to change it, and then if you go to page 23, I'll read this bullet point for the goals, objectives, and big ideas. It's the top bullet point on the right-hand side. Continue the green line and blue line,
and blue line.
and plan based on the unique context created by those lines. Identify the city's existing 4 unique landscapes into context areas to tailor planning efforts. The blue and green lines are foundational to the context area. I mean,
So then why isn't it called the blue and green line or the green and blue?
well, yeah, I mean, I think there was,
Transition area.
well, because there's a transition area guideline.
There are other transition areas.
Right, so I think,
It's not a hill to die on.
It's a hill for me to die on.
For me,
I
it's
will
to die on
not
as well.
be Part of a political maneuver.
it's not
And this
political.
it
Read-
is clearly political.
Read what this document
I've
says
read
right
it.
here.
I've read
The
it.
blue and the
This is
green
why-
lines are foundational to the context area. And that's the whole reason that it was renamed is because those 2 demarcation lines were the only thing that identifies this area for not being inland.
Sorry, I will not be a part of this.
I get
That's
it.
fine. I mean, we don't have to be, everybody doesn't have to be in favor of something, but I do think that we've made a change. It is the right change. Yes, it's very substantive, but I think that it was changed for a reason because there was a big enough need to make sure that there was an emphasis on what this context area was.
Why, can you explain that further? Because your comment right there is part of why I have these thoughts. Explain to me why you had to make this change to call it the green line context area. What was the point you felt you needed to make that was not made with all of the many comments that explain how valuable this is? And nobody suggested we move this line.
I can
at
explain
all.
that very easily because this is a land use document. And this explains exactly what the land use is within that area.
Why is that somehow different than all the other? Why specifically does it have to be green line? Why that? That term has very significant meaning. I know exactly why this was requested. It's been discussed at great length. Why that term? Why not something else?
Okay, well, if you want to name it the green and blue line context area, I'm completely fine with that. I proposed that. It got shortened down to green line. So if you want to name it the green and blue line context area, I'm completely fine with that. But it needs to identify the area for which it has been established. And those 2 lines are what establishes that area.
That is correct.
Yeah, I'm not disputing the line. I'm
Okay.
disputing the purpose of that name.
Because
Because as I say,
It identifies the land use that's within the area.
It's not, that is not somehow not defined without the name. It's clearly defined in the rest of this document. We know what it's for. There's no plan to get rid of green lines. There's no plan to get rid of blue lines. There's no lack of emphasis on those items. This was added as emphasis for political purposes, as were several other comments. And then I'm being told that somehow, because we're new, we're not supposed to be giving our comments on this because you all have settled this before we got here.
I think your comments are valid, and I've actually agreed that we
I
can
didn't mean to say
restructure.
that. I'm referencing other things.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
We need,
I'm
yeah,
going to say something now. Actually, it was voted on to change the name during one of the meetings. I believe You were there.
hold.
I'm not sure about the zip and it was a poll, yeah. But about changing the name because Holly and I were both on the side of keeping everything in the courthouse. But we have come to a point now where change may not be needed so much because, and I'd like to have, when we do vote on this, I'd like to have 100% vote. And I think most of you would. We don't want to produce something that we don't even support ourselves. But we're at a time frame now where we want to vote on this next month. Unless y'all want to have a night
No.
I'm
sorry.
You can let it go, but I'm not voting for it.
The level.
I'm not voting for it. As long as there's political language in this document, I'm not gonna vote.
Can I be heard really quick, John? I'm sorry. So the very first word in this document is imagine. And it's repeated throughout the first 2 pages. And in the forward, it said, it is not a regulatory document. It sets a direction. I believe we've had many projects come before the planning commission where we have set aside the stated goal of the comprehensive plan. We've gone with the demands of what is needed in the circumstance. There may be those who want to plan to jump out with their knives and stab to death the sacred cow, whatever it may be. But it is a guidance document. It says imagine. We do live in the Chesapeake, the greatest estuary in the United States. This is one of the most beautiful environmental regions on the planet. We have to recognize that. But we want to grow economically. We want new families here. I'm learning today we have anticipated growth of 80,000 residents. Okay, it's a little late today. But it says imagine. We need to make the language clear that this is not a regulatory document, but it's a guidance tool. So we need to make that more clear.
I think they cleared that up.
And
It is.
And but I think we need to be brought back to that point.
I always live in that spot because been here long enough to see when we changed, made additions, moved things from comp plan when it wasn't time to do it, but it was needed. And it's gonna be reviewed again in 5 years. I won't be here, some of you will, maybe. But it's time to move forward.
Aspiration, not a race.
So, see, you get to change this thing anytime we need to. And I think I can feel from my voting history that there are times when I will vote with the comp plan or with what staff has recommended. And some of you have too, but we understand we can do those things. But for timeliness and sake of moving on, I'd like to see us move on next month, which means we have to have another meeting or either you in today. So this is it.
I really need a piece, and I'll be very quick. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for so many references throughout the this document about underutilized shopping strips and those areas. So thank you. That means a lot to me, and it's multiple times. So I think it's a big deal to me and my district. Number two, I met with the planning commission staff in early December, and they were so kind to explain things to me. And I told them that I've lived in Virginia Beach for 6 years, and I actually lived in California for 3 years before that. And I ran away because I was just terrified with all the things that are happening out there in terms of development. And when my concern here is with vulnerable people, especially senior citizens, I want more development, right? I want that to be the priority. And then environment be number two, because that's, to me, trumps environment. So when I saw the contents page and I see overview and context for number one and then environment for number two, it just jumped out at me that the environment was placed higher than I think it should be. So my initial thought is, hey, can we just move, environment is so important, but can we move that to the bottom, like number 8, number 7, and just move everything up? But I'm wondering if, I'm looking at, let's see, pages, oh shoot, did I just need that space? I don't need it. There was, shoot, if you give me 2 seconds. Sorry, 20 something. I mean, later, oh, here, okay, let's see. 25 maybe, or is it, no, is it 23? It says goals, objectives, and big ideas. You got about the Imagine stuff. And the next page you have economic, housing, and then economic, environmental sustainability. So that's the great priority. And I'm very happy about that. Maybe line 1, overview, comma, context, comma, development. I want that to be known to everyone that development is more important than the environment, even though I know we live in a beautiful area where the environment is so important. So that's, to me, that jumps out. I'm a very superficial person, and I'm so afraid that somebody who's also superficial with a California mindset will come and say, hey, environment's really important, and that's more important than development, and put any kind of slowdown, any kind of housing development because of environmental reasons.
I want to reiterate, 46% of the city is, I believe our number one economic driver is number three. Okay, number three. Yes, we are going, the city is going to develop. Okay. But when the last tree is cut down and the last water hole is filled, where will we go? Okay. I think the way that it's set up, thank you for putting that up there. City-wide goals, okay? I live in District 7 where nobody does anything. Okay. This John lives in District 2 where there is a complicated discussion. You could call it argument, fight, but I would say discussion over where we will develop, why we won't develop there, why we should develop there. Catherine is in the middle of the city where things are popping and jumping, okay, and stuff is being brought in. We've got to look at all of it. We've got to look at all of it. I think a lot of people have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into this document. I think a lot of people have done long dissertations. I'm not talking about you now.
I didn't say it, I wrote it.
I think we have come to a point that, and I have to agree with our chairman, we need to vote on this, okay? We need to move along. It is already late. It is already late because of the pandemic. And do I love everything in it? No, I'm not. Okay. But for the most part, I think, it's a good document. And we've all had an opportunity to be at multiple meetings and have our say. So, whether that's the hill you want to die on or not, we got to think about the whole city. It's we, not I, and it's us, not them.
That's
a poll. What's that? It's a poll.
One thing that I hope everybody finds just as much humor as I did when I saw this, if you could go to page 25, I would just make one suggestion about changing the picture that's on this page. Because
is that the one that Jonathan?
No.
I was going to say, that's the best. Welcome to the North End.
We talk about housing attainment and diversity, but we have a picture of the North End right there. There's not much housing attainment.
Oh.
In that, that's
Or all the new duplexes are
Tearing
gonna
down
get.
the cottages, so many duplexes every day.
Yes, they have
They're
more stuff out
doubling.
there than
But
District 7.
I think we're looking for attainable housing.
Well, then come to District 4.
Yes.
I just don't know if the attainment is actually there for the people that we're trying to, when we talk about housing attainment.
Ain't no pictures of District 7 in here, shut up.
Well, I guess, John, you're asking for a poll on whether we're gonna move forward with those next. Yes, correct. I don't think we're gonna solve some of these disagreements by passing notes back and forth to the staff and asking them to make changes at this final hour. I'm not pledging my vote one way or the other. Like saying, I can vote to move this along to the whole. I think we all need to hold our vote, discuss it, have a hearing, and vote on it. But I'm I'm willing to move forward. And if it comes back, don't be shocked. If it comes back with changes requested, don't be shocked. It's hard to make everyone happy in this process, which is not really the goal. The goal is to put a broad document together with the weaknesses to come with that, making a broad document. So, I mean, if we're taking a poll, then I take the poll that we vote next month.
While I don't anticipate this, let's be honest, there are 11 members here, an odd number. So next month, if we first hold a vote whether or not to send the document, and again, I don't anticipate, but suppose the majority says, no, it needs more work, let's not send it. What's to stop council from saying, we're going to take your last version and go?
Because we have to approve it first.
We have to.
We have to
approve it?
recommend,
You have to recommend denial, you can recommend approval.
But
You
either
have
way
to
it
do something.
goes.
To make a recommendation.
It's going to council either way. We're just
Exactly.
asked to
It's
give
going
our
to
voice.
council
in
either
favor.
way.
That's the way this is set up. That's the way it happens.
So it's almost perfunctory whether or not we vote to hold a vote, because it's going to council either way.
But as soon as it's on the agenda, the next step is already decided.
Yeah.
It's a two-step
With
process.
or without our blessing,
Well,
it's
let me
going.
ask one question, John, the staff. Is there any funding, awards, grants that are being delayed by us taking more time to consider this document? Things that we need to be concerned with that we're not, there are more deadlines piling up, there are more, stress on our city as a result of not doing this.
The only thing that I mentioned, the only thing I mentioned earlier is we do have a budget request in to start the zoning rewrite. And that is predicated on the comprehensive plan recommending it and that comprehensive plan being adopted.
And I guess it's a question, are we doing our job?
So we got 2 votes to vote for it next month. Do we have any more?
I'm happy to vote for it next month, but I'm not gonna vote for it.
Well, you don't want, you don't wanna know. It's not time yet for that. Okay, so that's 3 to vote for it
Yeah,
next month.
4.
4.
I just have a process question. Yes, well, first of all, yes, I'll be prepared to vote on it next month. But then, once it goes to council, if the council intent for changes, will they, through their process, change it, will it come back to us?
So if it gets to city council, we need you to answer this question. If it gets to city council and they want to make some adjustments to it, they can adopt it with those changes, correct?
Yeah, I only imagine it coming back if it's like this needs that large
Like a major
substantive
rewrite,
change.
for lack of
A better word, okay.
So to put a button on it, we have 2 agenda items next month. I understood from this morning that one agenda item will be the master transportation plan, which will come on the agenda before this. Because you have to have that before you can do this. Then there will be an agenda item on this. We're not going to do a combined vote for the 2 plans. It'll be A, then B, and whatever else our business is next month. Is that correct?
2 deferrals. 2 deferrals from today will be on the agenda as well.
No, it's
Yeah,
for
I know.
60. It's not, yeah.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
So if this is done, just to let you know how we're handling comments, we provided a final draft. We gave you a deadline through December 30. Comments, we received comments, we have that spreadsheet that we're addressing. And then if there's anything specific, there are a couple of things today that we caught, thanks shaking his head, and those will be the final edits. And so we will provide that spreadsheet to you with all of the updates from today, you'll know what we did, and then we can move forward.
Will the public be able to see that?
The public should be able to see everything, it should be posted on our comp plan webpage.
I meant the spreadsheet of
Yes.
comments and changes. Thank you.
This is gonna be a blue and green line. No.
Probably not for long. Probably not for long.
Should do that to someone.
We ready to go home?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank our council
And it's say, some say that on